It's really loud. Is that really loud? Is that better? Is that better? That's like the reverb or something. Let's see. Is that better? I don't know. That works. You can hear me. I'm capable of speaking, so we'll leave it at that. How's everybody doing? You guys doing okay here in week 9? Tired? Show of hands, who's just like exhausted? All right, yeah, me too. I'm wiped out. I need a nap. Okay, Dr. Hazi is supposed to be here to talk about creating CVs, a curriculum vitae, which becomes kind of an essential document if you're thinking about applying for grants, fellowships, sometimes research experience for undergraduates kind of programs. I don't see her yet, so we're going to go ahead and make announcements, and hopefully she will arrive while I'm doing that. Okay, number 1, we're going to go ahead and pass those out. Lana's going to pass out surveys. They're surveys from the Office of Community Engagement about last week's service project. Okay? Everybody had a good time with the service project? Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to try to do that every quarter. All right? So we'll do another one next quarter. Same deal, packing boxes. I don't know if we'll do it in the union or do it outside or what, but we'll do that again so people can get another hour of service or so. So yeah, please fill out this survey. And if you can, as you exit the room when you leave, just deposit it on one of the 2 back corner tables, okay? And then Lana will pick those up on her way out. All right? So that's announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, printing. Who's aware that we have free printing in the honor space? Just about everybody. Okay, we do have free printing in the honor space. But I want to ask you to be cognizant of how much you're printing. Lana's having to build the printer tray like a couple times a day. And we've seen people printing out like 60 slide presentations that have 1 slide per page and that kind of thing. So try to limit what you're printing. And we don't have an unlimited budget for paper. And we're already pretty low on how many reams of paper we have left. Okay? I have other announcements to make. Oh, right. A week from yesterday and a week from today, we're doing an honors program art show. It's going to be in room 149 in the honor space. We're going to have 7 tables set up there. Lana, there's still space? Okay, if you have art that you would like to display as part of the art show, reach out to Lana. We have a couple more spaces. I'll even be displaying some of mine. So you can come and criticize my, my paltry talents. What else were we announcing, Lana? Oh, right. On the 14th, so next week, next Thursday, we're celebrating Pie Day. We're going to have about 11:30 a whole bunch of pizzas brought in, right? Pizza, pie. Yeah. Hey. And then we'll also, I think we're having fruit pies as well. So come over to the honor space around midday to get pie of your choice. Trying to think of, I feel like there was still more. Announcements. Yes. Is there still space in spring break? Okay. Spring break trip is full. Who's going on the spring break trip? Oh, we got a good number of people. That's awesome. That'll be a lot of fun.
Dr. Marshall, do you want our names on this?
No, you do not need to put your name on the survey. Yeah, that can be anonymous. If you did put your name on, that's totally acceptable, but you don't have to. Did you put your name on there, Gabby?
No.
Okay.
But you're not gonna like my answer.
Oh, uh-oh. Okay, it's not a survey for me, so I won't be looking. Okay, so I still feel like there was one more announcement I haven't made. I should have written that down. Oh, yes. Sorry. If you are interested in living on campus next year, or if you plan to stay living on campus next year, we want to alert you to the fact that there's going to be an upperclassman LLC, right? So we've got the first year residential honors scholars this year living on the second floor of Cajon Hall where the honors space is. Next year we are also going to take over most of Building 2 in Arrowhead Village. If you are going to live on campus next year, when you go to your housing application, there ought to be a checkbox for living in honors housing. We hope that you will do that. We're going to be running honors-specific programming. It's looking like we're going to hire an advisor that will be doing co-curricular programming. And so we'll get that person involved in the life of the LLCs. Yeah, so it'll be a good experience. All right? Any questions about any housekeeping stuff? Okie doke. Well, then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hasia, who's going to talk about creating a CV.
Thank you. Oh, that's it. Okay. No problem. Is it this yours? No, that's not.
No, that is not.
Oh, there's someone's like driver's license. All right. All right, good afternoon. How are you guys?
Good.
Sorry, I don't really like them there, but I was running a little bit late because I just came from another meeting, so sorry about that. Looks like you guys had some business to discuss anyways. So I'm going to talk to you today about creating a CV. Who knows what a CV is? Anybody? Sarah, I know your name. Do you want to tell me what you think a CV is?
Like an academic resume?
Yeah, like an academic resume. That's a very good definition. Yeah, so it's basically like it's basically similar to a resume, although there are some differences, which I'll mention in just a moment. But it's basically a document that is intended to describe your relevant academic training and experiences, as well as any other kind of extracurricular activities or opportunities that you've been engaged in. And they're really important documents, and I think that unfortunately most undergraduate students don't always encounter the term or know that that is something that exists. I certainly know that when I was an undergrad, I didn't know what a CV was. Or I think I had an anthropology, that was a lie. I had an anthropology teacher that mentioned it one random day in class. He decided to show us his, but it didn't really make any sense to me what he was presenting to us. But I didn't actually make one or have one until I was already in my master's program. And for some things that makes sense. A lot of times you don't necessarily need it, or you're not going to have as much information to put on it, especially when you're just getting started, on your academic path. But it is something important to be thinking about, and it's never too early to start working on one. So I'll just get into the content now. So like I was saying earlier, it is a lot of times, you'll see like grant applications or scholarship applications or fellowship applications, and they'll say to submit your resume or CV in some cases. And they definitely do have some overlap, but there are some pretty significant differences between the two. The most noticeable difference, if somebody hands you their resume and somebody hands you their CV, the most notable immediate difference is that a CV tends to be considerably longer. Now, maybe if you're just getting started, and this is your first year, maybe they're both about the same. But as you move forward through your academic career or your actual career, your CV is going to be a lot longer. Whereas usually, once you're kind of getting more focused and you're actually working out in the kind of, applied domain, out in the kind of private sector, what you'll find is that, usually if you get advice about resume, it's to keep it to one page, right? So you're kind of like trying to get as much in there, but keeping it, as short as possible. A resume, is focused on including a summary of your skills, experience, and education. And so obviously there is some overlap with that, with the CV as well, because you're still including education and then skills and experiences. But with the CV, it's a little more focused, specifically on what's going to be most relevant to, in most cases, your academic interests. So for example, as somebody that was interested in clinical psychology, I didn't put, like on my resume, for example, I might have put that I worked at, my first job was in the mall at a steak sandwich place. So that was something that was normally on my resume, steak escape, cashier, blah, blah, blah. Like, that was my relevant work experience. I didn't put that on my CV because it's not really that relevant to clinical psych. Now, if I didn't have anything, I might have put it because I might have tried to beef up, like, look, I can work with people. I'm friendly, but thankfully I had other things that other experiences that I acquired, like volunteering for a crisis hotline and stuff like that I put instead. So with your resume, you're kind of putting, it's going to be more broad, it's going to be more inclusive of everything that you did, whereas your CV is going to be more focused to what it is that's relevant to your field or your interests. And it should be packaged as such. So even if you are saying, hey, I'm a cashier, but that still, taught me how to, deal with difficult customers and how to be patient and to work as part of a team, then you just want to make sure that it's tailored to kind of fit, its applicability to, say being a therapist or something like that. So for the purpose of the two is a little bit different as well. So a resume, those are traditionally used to get, an employment, to get employment or to get an interview. Whereas with the CV, the purpose is really for opportunities that are within the academic arena. So applying to graduate programs, applying to scholarships, grants, positions on campus. It's the most important thing, I think, if you're ever applying for an academic job, that's a necessary part of the application. It's really common if you're applying to doctoral programs to include a CV. It's not always required, but it's good to include one. And basically, in terms of now being in academia, like that is essentially like how I'm evaluated for my job is based off, obviously my work, but all of that gets showcased in a document that's very similar to a CV. If somebody invites me to speak, or if I'm applying to be, say, the director of the Office of Student Research, that's something that I commonly, would need to submit. Also, resumes tend to have a clear goal or objective clearly stated. So oftentimes that's at the top, and it's that's I think a challenging part of developing a resume is thinking like how exactly you want to say your stated goal or objective. With the CV, there isn't that piece. So I'm gonna go through kind of the components. Well, let me do this slide first. Sorry. So why start it early? You might think like, okay, I just started, I don't really have much to put, and I'll work on it when I need to. You never know when somebody might ask you for a CV. It's good to have on hand if you're ever going to meet with faculty from other institutions. Obviously, it's useful to include with applications for scholarships or grant opportunities. It's good to have with you at conferences, potentially. So that's the benefit of starting it early, is that you kind of always have it on hand. And it should be something that once you have it, you're continuously updating. So I don't update mine as much as I should, but when I was in grad school, I would update it quite often, because you never know when an opportunity is going to come up or when you're going to be asked. And also, our memories aren't always that great. You guys are juggling like class assignments and tests and everything else that you have to do. And it's really easy to forget, oh, hey, yeah, like even for me, I might forget that in a couple months from now, I'll be like, oh yeah, I did lead a workshop on you know, creating a CV, or I did volunteer for that event that one weekend. So that's another benefit of kind of doing it regularly, is sometimes if we rely on our memory to kind of fill in the details later, we might forget things that we've actually done that we should be kind of showcasing. It's also a useful tool to have ready to go if you know you're going to be asking for letters of recommendation for any kind of opportunity or program. When students approach me and ask me to write them a letter of recommendation, I always ask for two things: their statement of purpose, or whatever it is that they have to submit as part of their application for whatever they're applying for, and their CV. And part of the reason that I do this is that, especially with some students that I don't necessarily know particularly well, but I want to write them a really good letter, I can talk about things that I don't necessarily have direct knowledge of. So I may meet with my student and we may do research together, and maybe they were in one of my classes and I can talk about how they did in my class and their research, but I don't necessarily always have on my radar that, oh yeah, they're also in psychology club, and they're also, you know, volunteer with ASI, and they also do all these other things on campus. So by having like their CV, it also helps me fill in some of the details so that I can write a stronger letter. And I think that basically covers most of that. So before I get to this slide and kind of talk to you really about how you should go about setting it up, I think it's good we'll come back to this one, but I want to show you it at least briefly. I have an example of one just so that it can be kind of clear what we're talking about here. So this is not my CV, but it actually resembles my CV pretty closely. This was one of my former undergraduate and graduate mentees who is now in a PhD program. So she was an outstanding student. And this, I will tell you, not to get stressed out or anxious, I almost brought in my CV from when I applied to master's programs, but there was like not as much on it, and I wanted to go through all the relevant sections. But this is somebody that was, you know, very active in research and in other clubs and organizations in campus, and this is her CV that she used after, you know, essentially being in her third year of a master's program. So don't feel like, oh my God, I need to have all this stuff, and I don't have it because this was, you know, 5 years ahead for most of you or more. Okay, so you hear, you know, one of the most important pieces that always kind of goes first. I have her name, and like she has her name, her address, and email, and I kind of skipped that part just because, you know, I couldn't figure out how to block it out in Adobe. I was trying to do that all afternoon. Okay, but the most important part that you start with is your education. So and if you do a thesis or something of some sort, which all of you will do, it's kind of customary to put the title of the thesis and then who your mentor was as well. And so you can imagine, like, even if she didn't have an MA, you can just imagine the BA kind of includes that kind of relevant information. She also was a transfer student, so she included information on her other kind of degrees and colleges that she attended. Some people feel like kind of two ways about this, like you don't really need to include it, you can just start it in bachelor's, but there's no really right or wrong way to approach that. Then she has this section where she just kind of summarizes her research interests. So talking about how her research interests are within trauma and resilience, and getting kind of a little bit more detailed into what about that she's interested in. And then she puts forth her research experience where she describes, in this case, she actually didn't work in my research lab, I was just we just kind of worked on independent projects together. So she described that project and kind of what she did. This is a research lab that she was part of, so that she did a lot of work in, so she described that, and then it includes publications, presentations, campus talks, poster presentations, don't get anxious, awards and scholarships. She was awesome. You all will be awesome too. Time. I mean, I actually was a little nice because I looked at my first CV and looked at my current CV and I'm like, yeah, you know. Teaching experience, but you just don't feel that way in the moment sometimes. It's daunting, but you all will get there. Teaching experience, professional experience, volunteer experience, association memberships, and then personal references, okay? So we'll come back to this, I think, at the end, like as you have questions or as I'm talking about specific questions, but you can kind of get an idea of what kind of information goes on here. And clearly, if she was applying for a job in the private sector, this would be way too much information, right? Like, this is not a resume at all. Like, that was about, it's 6 pages here. It's pretty long. Okay. So, now that you have an idea of kind of what we're talking about, some general setup suggestions. Make sure that you use the same font throughout the document. And that goes even just for emails or personal statements. Even sometimes, sometimes the header or footer might be like in Times New Roman and the rest of it using Arial. It just doesn't look nice. It's a little pet peeve of mine. Just make sure that you take the time to make sure that everything is in the same font. It looks better. It's more visually appealing. It looks professional. For font size, it's best to use 12-point font. I mean, sometimes you can get away with 11. 14 usually just looks artificially big. Like, you're not fooling anybody when you turn something in 14, trying to make it longer. It just, maybe you could try 12.5, but 14 is too big. But I think 12 is best. That's kind of like the standard font. Now, and unlike a resume, you don't have to, or there isn't an expectation that you have to kind of get special resume paper. You certainly can, but it's not required or necessary. It should be single-sided, so even though it's many, many pages, you always print it in a single-sided fashion. No underlining. I skipped that one because I'm kind of like, well, it kind of depends on maybe what you're underlining, but generally, I think less is more. So you certainly want to make use of the bold feature when you want certain things to stand out or when you're trying to deviate between sections. Like you can see on hers, like the year and the name of the degree is bolded, right? But sometimes if there's too much bolding and too much underlining and too much italics, it's kind of just distracting. So kind of minimizing that or only using it like really intentionally keeps it from, I think, being a little bit overwhelming. So, another important piece of information, which I think I mentioned when I was here last talking about personal statements. If you guys remember with personal statements, I said it's all about fit, right? And that's what they're kind of gauged by reading your personal statement. The same is true of CVs. A CV is also a good way that you can use how you organize information to suggest or illustrate your fit with a particular program or grant or scholarship. So this student, this example, she was applying to clinical psychology PhD programs which heavily emphasize research. So the ones where you're funded and you're basically applying to a mentor to work in their lab. And they usually have this bias where they tend to favor people that at least say they have academic kind of ambitions or goals. So that's why if you look at her CV, the research experience, the publications, presentations, all that came first before talking about her teaching experience, which of course is great and relevant, before talking about her other work and jobs on campus and clubs she was a part of. Now, if she were, say, applying to our Master's in Clinical Counseling program here, which is much more applied, she would be probably better off still putting like her degrees and, maybe she might decide to put like honors and awards first and then move into relevant clinical experience. And then put research and then put teaching. Or same thing, if she was applying to a teaching assistant position, then she might start with teaching first and then do research and then service and everything. So it really depends on what it is that you're applying for, what the focus of that program is, how you organize it. So when you look at hers or when we go through these slides, they're in a particular order, but really you can always move sections around depending on what you're applying to. It always goes in reverse chronicle, use action words when describing experiences. So I think I talked about that. It's kind of using similar language that you would in a personal statement. So, and it's useful to include, like where it comes up is when you're describing, let's go down to, well, I guess I could pick the research part, but let's go down a little bit. So here, she was a peer lab facilitator for, through our OSR program. So she could just say peer lab facilitator off student research, but she provided a description. And that's something important to do as well. Whenever you're describing what you did, don't assume that the person reviewing your CV is going to know about that. So you don't always have to include so much information. It kind of varies depending on what it is. Don't be overly wordy, you know, like put a paragraph after every single thing. But use enough text so that you can at least provide some information about what you did or what it was like to be in that role. If you just say like youth mentor for Boys and Girls Club, you know, that's informative, but it's not as informative as knowing like what your commitment was, how often you went there, what you did with the kids, etc. So, and you want to use action words like provided students with one-on-one instruction in group of core concepts covered in experimental psychology course. Responsible for grading, providing feedback to improve understanding. Advise students in developing a research presentation. Provided in-class and one-on-one instructions on formulating a research question, performing a lit review. So she's clearly describing, like, using action words to kind of describe exactly what it is that she did. And that's not too different from a resume. Usually for a resume, you also provide a little bit of information about what you did in a particular role or a particular job. So here, like assistant to associate chair, coordinating faculty course assignments. She coordinated a lot of different things. But you get the idea. That's what I mean by active language, action words, like actually describing what it is that you did. And then the CV should always be in reverse chronological order. So much like a resume, you're going to start with your most recent experiences within each category first, and then kind of go backwards. Margins, 1 inch all around, again, like pretty standard. Use bolding caps to have things stand out. Number your pages. I also recommend that in addition to numbering your pages, you also put your last name on every page, like in the header or the footer. And that way, just in case a page gets left off or falls off, or, you know, sometimes people have so many application files that they're reviewing at once, it kind of just makes it, ensures that, you know, nothing's going to get taken out. I don't know if she had a page, yeah, so she had, usually with a CV you also put like when you last updated it as well. Avoid graphics, excessive lines, shading, etc. Any questions so far? No? Okay. You're all super excited to go home and make your CVs this weekend. Okay, so what should be on the CV? I already mentioned at the top, you know, you can put your name, your permanent mailing address, an email address that will expire, and phone number. So permanent mailing address, email address, and phone number that doesn't, email address that won't expire, that's important. Because you never know when people might contact you about an application, and so if it is, say, your school email, once you graduate, that email stops working after a certain amount of time. Same thing, if you move every year, then, you could always, of course, make sure that you change your address every single time, but you never really know if someone's going to pull that information for somewhere else. So it's best to use, you know, what's going to be the most reliable and kind of long-standing way to kind of get a hold of you. Then goes your educations, and then these are pretty standard sections that are included: honors and awards, professional experience, and it can be multiple sections, like you saw on the example, where there was a section on employment and teaching and a section on research. She also, I don't know if she did, but it's also, I see a lot, like people have a section on like clinical or applied experience. So whatever kind of professional work, and if there's something that kind of differentiates the two, then you do that. Usually it's service, teaching, and research. publications and presentations. Once you have these, that's also usually what comes first, especially if you're applying for something that is academic in nature, where your kind of scholarly or creative work is kind of presented first. And then any extracurricular and volunteer experience. Other possible sections, so those are kind of the standard sections that are included, but there's other sections that you might have as well, and some of these were on hers. But if you have any special certifications or any particular types of licenses, you'd want to have a section on that. Very similar to like with the resume. Professional affiliations, so you saw on hers, she mentioned some of the organizations that she was a student member of. I think it was down here. So Phi Kappa Phi, Honor Society, Psi Chi, Western Psychological Association, so on. Golden Key, so she mentioned that there. Professional activities, so again, if there's anything else that's like relevant, like if you have some kind of work experience that doesn't fall within teaching, research, or say volunteer work, but it's relevant work experience you want to mention, you might include a separate section for that. Research interests, obviously your research interests are going to come through when somebody's looking at what kind of like say lab experience you have, or when somebody's looking at your posters or presentations or publications. But at the top, she also included like just a summary of her research experience. I think that's a good thing to include, but you don't necessarily see it across the board, so that's why I have it in the other section. Added qualifications, so anything else, if you're fluent in 3 different languages, or if you have certain, statistical, if you're familiar with certain statistical programs or something like that, you might want to mention that, as you would on the resume. And then references. Again, that's typically included, but not always. It's not definitely a required section, but having a part at the end where you put your references. Usually anywhere from 2 to 5. I think 3 is a good number. That's also the number that they usually ask for if they're asking for letters of recommendation. And so if you're applying to like graduate school, a good idea would be to put your references, the names of the people that are writing you letters, to send them as references. But occasionally there might be 1 or 2 extra that you throw on there, but it shouldn't be like pages and pages of just references. And for references, the common, I'm just getting over a cold. The common format is kind of including the person's name, their affiliation, and then their contact information. And usually you want to ask people, is it okay if I put you as a reference on my CV? Okay, so now we'll go through the specific sections. Education is obviously the easiest section. It's most straightforward. You're going to put your most current schooling first. Usually you're going to start obviously with your bachelor's degree. You're only going to include diploma distinctions. So unless you have a degree in progress, then obviously you'd still want to mention it. Like you guys would all put, bachelor's, and then usually people will put like their expected graduation date, or they'll put in progress, or they'll put like fall 2018 to present, or something like that to imply that it's ongoing. But if it's just, say, a school that you took a class or 2 at, or that you transferred from, you don't typically report that. You're really only meant to kind of report degrees that are earned when you're describing your kind of educational background. And then if you do a thesis or something of that nature, then typically you do put the title and the mentor, which I already mentioned. Honors and awards, you're going to want to list the most recent first, and you're going to want to put the title and then the date that you got the award. You can go all the way back to undergrad usually, but typically not before. If there was something really exceptional that, maybe you got recognized as a presidential scholar or something like that in high school, then I think that that's okay to leave on there. Probably once you're applying for academic jobs, you probably can take that off. But for your kind of level right now, I think if there's especially something significant, I would mention it just because it's more recent, so it makes sense. Now, the thing about putting awards, which, let's see if she did, she probably did. I know I looked this over before she sent it out. But you can see when she lists her awards and scholarships, it says, the year that she got it, and the name of the scholarship or award. She's also put the amount. This is a good idea to put, especially if you're getting, a large amount of money, like, this graduate equity fellowship. She got $3,000. Like, that's pretty awesome. So, you want to mention that. She has some smaller ones too. But if there is like a monetary amount associated with it, it's a good idea to include it. And then if you notice in parentheses, which you don't necessarily, I don't know if the parentheses are necessary, but she kind of describes what these are. And that's important because you can't assume that whoever's looking at your CV is going to know, they're not going to be familiar with your institution, they're not going to be familiar with OSR, so make sure you spell kind of everything out as much as you can. So for all of these, she says, like for example, for the Graduate Equity Fellowship, she says, awarded annually to underrepresented ethnic minority students with disabilities or women that are underrepresented in areas who have PhD aspirations. That's actually directed through our Office of Graduate Studies, if you guys are ever interested in applying. These are all CSUSB scholarships or awards, but the idea is you're going to want to say something about it, so it's clear like why you got it. That's helpful for somebody that's on the reviewing end to know. It's also common to put, usually, I don't think she did, she had a lot of other awards here. She had a lot of awards, so she probably took it out because she didn't need to, but in earlier versions, back when she was an undergrad, and it's pretty common for students to put like Dean's List, like if they made Dean's List in the years that they made Dean's List or the quarters that they made Dean's List. She kind of, I don't think has it in here because I think she got enough stuff in that department, but it's a good idea to include that as well. Yeah?
Where can I find the PowerPoints?
I can send them to Dr. Marshall and he can distribute them to you all. For any of them that I've been here for if you'd like, but I'll send them to you. Yeah, it's a lot to remember. Okay. So any questions so far, other than that? Yeah.
So how, I know obviously grammar and spelling stuff are important, but would you recommend maybe even hiring a copy editor or having somebody else look at it at least? Or?
Yeah, I don't know as far as hiring a copy editor, but I definitely think having other people review it, just like the statement of purpose. I always recommend you get at least one faculty member or one person that has knowledge of kind of the field and familiarity with the kinds of things that you're applying to look it over, and then really anybody else that's willing to give it a look. And sometimes, there's just lots of little things that you might miss, our eyes kind of play tricks on us, and sometimes you might notice oh, I didn't bold my name on this citation, but I bolded it here. So that's also helpful when you have other people look at it because they might notice things that you just missed. And of course typos, just like a statement of purpose, you don't want to have typos because this is also something that the assumption is that this is an important document and this is something that you've put a lot of time into. So if you don't have time to put together a nice one, or if it's not super strong and polished, it's probably better to just not include one, unless of course you have to. But yeah, that's a great question. You definitely want to spend time on this one and get as many people as possible to look it over. And usually students will send me both, not just because I'm writing them a letter, but those are the two things that I review most often for my students and give them feedback on. Okay, so professional experience section. So I mentioned that this can be, these can be separate sections, like say one on teaching, one on research, one on service, one on employment, but assuming you have separate sections, it might vary. You just want to tailor what you put in each section, but it should include anything you were paid to do or that was extensive regular volunteer work. So sometimes people do what we call like try to pad their CV, just like people pad their resume, you know, you try to add things. And it really doesn't have much benefit if you say like, oh, I volunteered this one day and did this one thing. It becomes kind of transparent that you're trying to like pad your CV, which it's almost better to just put your real accomplishments and experiences than try to like artificially inflate it with stuff, because sometimes that can be viewed unfavorably. So try to just list things that you do regularly and that you've actually done, to avoid kind of being misperceived by whoever's reviewing your CV. Again, list most recent items first. If you're listing research, it's pretty common to include the lab and the name of the PI or faculty mentor that you worked under. If you worked as part of a grant, typically you put the name of the grant or the mechanism, like NSF grant, and the name of the grant, or if it was like an R01, which is like an NIH grant, then you want to put that specific number and mechanism and name of it. Some of these are experiences that you might not necessarily obtain until graduate school, but you never know. I'll send you the slides, so one day you can always refer back to them. And then a brief summary of what you did, which I think I kind of already have kind of covered, but you can see for her sections, like this is her research experience section, and yeah, she put the name, and then the project she was involved with, and then what she did, and so on. And just the same for like teaching, the name of like her role, the name of the class, the name of the institution, and then what she did, and so on. Extracurricular and volunteer experience section lists the most recent first again. And like I said, it's better to include things that you're doing on a regular basis than list every single volunteer experience that you did. Any student organization, now if you're just a member of that student organization, I would list it under the organization's affiliations section, but if you actually had a role or a job, maybe you were president or secretary or treasurer or volunteer coordinator or event planner, I don't know. If you had a specific role, then I would separate that out and describe what that was. And if there's somebody that, say there's like psychology has an honor society, Psych-Chi, so if you were, say, treasurer for Psych-Chi, you could also include the name of the faculty mentor, the faculty advisor to that club, right? Or if you're describing university honors program, you probably want to include Dr. Marshall's name on there somewhere as like the program coordinator. Just because if they ever wanted to, they're not probably going to, but if they ever wanted to inquire about your experience or your role, in part of this program or your performance, they know who the contact person is, if that's kind of like the supervisor. So you can kind of see her volunteer experience here. She was on the Great Appeal panel, I didn't know that. And then she was involved in the community outreach program on campus. Let's see, professional section, I think it's pretty kind of redundant here. Only the things that are current, include all dates and affiliation. Let's see. Publications and presentations, so this is also most recent, goes first. You always want to make sure that if you have co-authors or co-presenters that you bold your name. That's important. That stands out, so that gives them a sense of what your role or involvement was in the project. And depending on your discipline, you want to make sure that they're in the appropriate format. So because this is a psychology student, she follows the APA style guidelines. So they have actually guidelines about how to put your poster presentation on your CV. So that's like what's reflected here. And she only included actual conference presentations, but again, that's because she was a little bit further on, kind of in her academic career. But it would also be great, she did meeting of the minds many of times. That would be something that you would put on your resume. So don't discount things that you do on campus, like Meeting of the Minds or the CSUSB research competition, or if you get asked by your mentor to go talk about something elsewhere, or if you go to a student research conference like UCLA's or University of Redlands or something like that, still put it, even if they're student conferences. Eventually, as you get kind of more experience, some of those student conferences, like, you can kind of take them off, but I would encourage you to include them. She has a lot of, like, national and regional conference presentations, so obviously those are a little more desirable, but put anything you do as a student. So remember, this is 3 years into a graduate program, so I recall her CV back when she was an undergrad, and she had things like Meeting of the Minds and stuff like that. But you always want to make sure that they're in the appropriate format. So these are in APA format since she's psychology. Let's see. If anything is submitted or pending, so say you have applied for Meeting of the Minds, but you haven't gotten confirmation that you're going to present yet, it's still okay to list it. You would just list that it's under review. So instead of putting like the date of the conference or the year, you would just put in parentheses under review. Same thing if it was like a paper or something of that nature. If it's currently just being reviewed, then you still list it, because just the fact that you have applied to do that or have something to present is notable. It's a good idea also that if you do have a publication or you submit to even a student journal, like the Office of Student Research's student journal, which I'm sure at some point you'll all submit. It's good, anything you list as a publication or like a poster presentation, it's a good idea to make sure that you kind of basically, as long as it's on your CV, that you keep copies. You never know when people might ask you for those things. For example, when I got the job here and I submitted this very lengthy, detailed document that they use as part of our review process, anything that I had listed on my CV I had to produce. So I had to print out like posters that I did like, 5 years ago. So you never know when somebody might ask you, or that somebody might be like, oh, I'm interested in that project, can you send it to me? So anything that you put on there, you want to make sure that you have a copy of. Additional qualifications, I already kind of mentioned this already. So that could be if you're fluent in different languages, or if you have certain cultural knowledge, especially if you've had hands-on experience, or anything else special, or any special skills that you have. Just make sure that you're honest in the special skills. Don't say you're fluent in Spanish if you're not fluent in Spanish, because you never know. Someone might be like, great, I'm so excited to have you in my lab because you can conduct these interviews in Spanish, and then you'll be like, deer in headlights. So, references, I think I already mentioned that. So that's basically all of the kind of relevant information. I will send the slides so that you guys have them, because again, some of this stuff, it's not going to really seem relevant until it comes up. But I warn you, it can quickly come up. So if you have free time, it's not a bad thing to kind of start doing. And also, it's kind of just a nice experience to reflect back on what you've done. I'm going to just make an embarrassing personal share, but sometimes in graduate school, when I was bored and I didn't really want to do real work, I would just like edit or play with my CV, and sometimes it was nice. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it was depressing, I guess. But sometimes it was nice to kind of look back and kind of see what you've done and see it grow over time. I pretty much have a draft from every year since I've had one, and then plenty of in between. And I don't look back at them anymore, but it's nice to see how it grows over time as you kind of continue on in your academic career. And sometimes just getting it on there, you can see like, God, I just really don't have anything to put about volunteer experience. I've been so busy focusing on school and my exams and work that I never even realized like volunteer experience was important. Like, I don't have a section that can remind you like, oh, I should probably, try to find a way to build that into my schedule. So I didn't know you were here when I made my personal share about looking at my CV. Are there any questions about anything? No? All right. Well, Well, that's all I've got. Oh, did you have a question?
Once we graduate from this college and we want to ever have someone look over our CV, can we always come to CSUSB or any other college to like ask for help?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the best person to go to is your mentor, but also alumni here use our Career Center, and especially like the Career Center is kind of the best place to go. But you can always approach, you know, even if somebody wasn't somebody I worked directly with, but they asked me and they said, hey, I'm applying programs, I'm a psych undergrad, can you help me about this? That's part of our role as a faculty member, I think. You know, why we have office hours is for, you know, to be available for students that aren't just our immediate students. So, but certainly with a mentor, I mean, that's kind of, when you take on a student, you kind of take them on for life. So you should never feel shy about kind of going back and asking for help. And if you don't know anybody within the department, then you could always ask the chair, and they might be able to find somebody or send it out to somebody. And of course, like at most universities, there's like a career center or something of that sort that always works with alumni. But yeah. You can always come to the Office of Student Research too. I have reviewed very many CVs. Okay, so I will send Dr. Marshall the slides so that you have them. I'll send the statement of purpose ones too. I don't remember if I did. Again, those two things especially, you might not need right now, but you might need them 6 months from now or a year from now, so they're good to have on here. So, all right, that's all I've got. So.
Thank you very much for that. Since it's week 9, I won't keep you here by telling you anything for the point of talking. So have a great weekend, get some rest, and finish strong. And leave the surveys on the back corner tables, please.